I think of energy transition as a train that is already moving. 90% of money spent on climate goes to mitigation. Decarbonizing the entire global energy system is not really achievable.
Are we really transitioning?
If we don't have the technology and knowledge, then we should learn.
The wealth of the country is not oil, it's not critical minerals, it's people. Welcome to the Astana Times Unplugged podcast series, where we break down complicated things into simpler terms.
We are your hosts, Asir and Aida, and our guest tonight is Aruzhan Meirkhanova. She's a senior researcher at the National Analytical Center here in Astana, and she has been working over the years on some of the biggest questions facing Kazakhstan, and not only Kazakhstan, but the whole world, ranging from energy security, regional dynamics, and we are here tonight to uncover this all. Thank you very much, Aruzhan, for joining us tonight in the studio. Very, very happy to have you tonight with us.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
So if we start from something personal, and I know we share something in common because you're also a Nazarbayev University alumna, right? Like me. But I also know that you studied in Harvard. If we could start from that and you could share with us, what was it like for you, your experience in the States?
It was really fascinating and truly life-changing. I mean, as you said, my background is in political science and international relations from Nazarbayev University, which helped me very much to, get this foundation, which then helped me get into an Ivy League school. But, you never expect such things to happen. I've never dreamt of being at Harvard. And when my dream came true, I was, of course, very happy. I don't need to say a lot about Harvard's, history, reputation. We all know it very well, that it's one of the oldest and best universities in the world and in the United States. But what made my story at Harvard truly life-changing are people. Mm-hmm. So people are the main asset of that university. I worked with one of the best experts in Russian studies, Timothy Colton. I worked with Dr. Alexandra Vakru at the Davis Center, and also Nargis Kasenova, who is from Kazakhstan, and she leads a program on Central Asia at the Davis Center.
Oh, so, that's cool. Yeah. I didn't know that.
My degree is in regional studies with focus on post-Soviet region. And I also took courses from Kennedy School, from business school, all of this. And faculty members there, they're one of the best thinkers in their fields. And also, of course, my classmates, students, about the situation ongoing now with the international student body. And I think what makes Harvard and other global universities great is this opportunity to benefit from diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, backgrounds, perspectives. I was in class sitting with a person who went to run for vice president of Ecuador.
Really?
Some things like this. And you have bright individuals from all around the world. And that's what makes... And the international students are basically a heart of Harvard, and I support the university's current position, and I do hope that it gets resolved in a favorable way for students and for everyone.
That sounds very inspiring. I mean, to sit in a classroom with individuals like this. But honestly, the situation with Harvard now is very disturbing. I agree with you. But we're now sitting in Astana, and you came back home to Kazakhstan. And, talking about Harvard and all the opportunities that it gave you and it could have given you, why did you decide to come back home?
Well, there are both personal and professional reasons for that decision. On a more personal level, United States is a great country to study, to get education, for career, and on multiple fronts. But, its social welfare system is quite different from what we are accustomed to here. There are certain safety concerns that I had overall, and also this is probably much more important. My husband was closer to Kazakhstan, and we both planned and decided that we will come back. But, on the professional front, of course, I wanted to be part of some positive developments in my own country. Because my degree was in regional studies with focus on Central Asia, I thought to better understand the region and to understand the realities on the ground, I can't really do that from afar.
Right.
I mean, I have to have some work experience on the ground, and I really wanted to do that. And, I love my country, so that was one of the main reasons. And when I came back, I was lucky to get into the EBRD, which is one of the top investors in Kazakhstan, institutional investors. And it was a very enriching experience as well. I worked on, energy, water, and transport sector reforms in Central Asia and Mongolia. And now I'm with the National Analytical Center, which is a subsidiary of Nazarbayev University. We conduct evidence-based research on multiple issues, ranging from, macroeconomic policy to different types of domestic issues and foreign policy.
It's so nice to hear your story because, it brought some memories for me because I have also studied in the United States. And when I went to study 10 years ago, when I came back 10 years ago, I've heard, and I still keep hearing about this brain drain, that people get worried about it, that, young people from Kazakhstan are leaving to the United States, to the United Kingdom, to any Western country. But there are like two thoughts about it, and I would like to pick your brain on that. Some call it brain drain, but I sometimes see it more as agents of change. And you mentioned Nazim Hassanova, right? Nargis, I'm sorry. She works at Harvard. She leads some departments and program, right? Program
on Central Asia, right.
So see, she's already an agent of change in some way. What are your thoughts? Is there a brain drain, or can we reframe it to agents of change?
Look, it depends on how you define brain drain and what time frame we're thinking, sort of. So, some of these people who are working abroad and are agents of change, in my opinion, they will eventually come back to this country, and perhaps they will bring the best practices from abroad here, and they will add even more value. So if we're thinking long term, if we create the conditions for which they will come back, it's a win-win, right? They will get the best experience and come back and do that here. But of course, in current terms, it seems like loss of certain economic value for us. But I've talked to many people who are studying in the United States, my colleagues, all of them really have very warm feelings toward their country. And even if when they are there, they try to bring up Central Asia or Kazakhstan as much as they can. There's this Silk Road Innovation Hub in Silicon Valley. There's this program on Central Asia that I mentioned that Nargis leads, So all of our students, and I wouldn't say all, but I would say a big part of them, they are not indifferent to Kazakhstan. And I'm sure that if life circumstances align, they will be happy to be back.
I agree that sometimes that's what was one of my points when I interviewed Aset Abdualiyev, who is heading the Silk Road Innovation Hub. In Silicon Valley. I hope it's the right name. But in Kazakhstan, there are some fields where a person can thrive.
Right.
Some fields where we need to do some work to make sure that when people come back, or people even from other countries come to Kazakhstan to work, they can thrive too. Because I would like to see a country as open as the United States. Not like right now under this particular administration, but in general. I always saw similarities between Kazakhstan and the United States in terms of our people open-mindedness, the desire to learn from others, But I'm so interested when you said that when you were sitting in the classroom at Harvard, that's why I want to ask you again about the agents of change, because you said you were among students who were like at the forefront of, innovation, change in their home countries. Can you imagine like building such a network, and that person will become someday vice president of Ecuador, and you will become, I don't know, a deputy or prime minister of Kazakhstan, or even the president, who knows? It matters. I think such network, plays a big role in person's career in general.
Exactly. I mean, that's the reason people go to the schools. They go primarily, I believe, for networks, for people, because the material, AI is there, Google is there. You can basically study it from wherever in the world, right? But being there and talking to these people, showcasing your personality and learning about them, about small talks in the United States, right? So I think it's a big part of the reason why people go there. And we are living in have been living for a long time at least, and still hopefully are in open world, a globalized world. So
that's exactly what I wanted to bring up, because I'm really an advocate of this globalization thing, and I think that since we have all these opportunities, people are free to decide wherever they can go, stay, live, work. I know we have like this patriotic feelings and stuff, and some feeling of belonging to your particular home country, but again, if if person decides to live somewhere, I think it's his or her free choice, and I don't really believe in this brain drain thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, we live in a globalized world, and it's eventually at the end it's a win-win for everyone, right? To be part of whichever economy you want to be part of, right? And since we're just a few days, a week since the major event, the Astana International Forum, it was pretty much in headlines, and we've been there covering it a lot. And one thing that I wanted to talk about about energy, right? And energy transition overall is a buzzword. It's everywhere. None of the plenary sessions, I think, were without saying or mentioning these words. And as a journalist, I spent pretty much time covering this topic as well. And I want to ask you, as an expert and as a person who devoted a lot of time to this topic in particular, where do you see Kazakhstan positioned in this global energy transition curve?
Thank you for this question. I think of energy transition as a train that is already moving. And we're not going to be probably as Kazakhstan in the driving seat, mm-hmm. right? But we definitely have to be on board, because climate challenge is a global challenge. Even if you emit less than 1% of global emissions, you will still see the consequences, right? And everyone will. We already are facing these consequences. In that sense, everybody, I think, in the policy-making circles understands well, including in Kazakhstan, that we need to take action. That is why we have decarbonization strategy until 2060. Mm-hmm. Now the roadmap is being developed, and we're taking different kinds of measures to incentivize both climate mitigation and adaptation measures. But here I want to just... maybe it's an interesting thought, right? Because now 90% of money spent on climate goes to mitigation, mm-hmm. which is basically actions that are taken to reduce greenhouse emissions or prevent them, such as building renewable energy capacity or capturing carbon and things like this. But adaptation is going to play a greater and greater role, which means we have to adjust to the consequence of climate change and either take measures to make ourselves more prepared or, recover quickly, which is called resilience. For example, irrigation systems mm-hmm. that will help us address water scarcity mm-hmm. in a way, or like building the dams to prevent
to make
flood.
sure we save water and prevent floods.
Exactly, yeah. So these different kinds of measures are going to get more important. I think we have to be very realistic here that, decarbonizing the entire global energy system is not really mm-hmm. Achievable, although it's a good, target point. We have to do something to get there. But in reality, we will also have to take measures to be ready for the consequences, because it's already on the move.
Mm-hmm. I know that you mentioned that we have to be on board, but sometimes, covering all these events and hearing all the experts and, high-level people talking about this thing, it doesn't seem for me, it seems like very much bureaucratic thing, like it's only on paper. Mm-hmm. But me as a person, as a person who's living here in Astana, seeing all the things firsthand, sometimes energy transition words seem so far away. Like when people are talking about energy transition from these high rostrums and conferences and panel sessions, I know they're speaking with all these words that sound very smart, mm-hmm. But in the reality, again, if we do a reality check, are we really there? I know that we are on board, we are trying to be on board, and we are hearing a lot from the government that we are adapting this and that. But I don't know, maybe I'm a bit skeptical person and I want to apply a bit of scrutiny to things like this, but are we really transitioning? Because...
especially for a country like Kazakhstan, right, that relied so heavily on fossil fuels for so long. But I feel like when I was writing my column about Astana International Forum, I feel like what I saw in President Tokayev, like this year for the first time, although I'm covering a lot of his speeches for like the last 2-3 years, I feel like he's trying to like, hedge his risks, bet on the climate change agenda, on the, mitigating risks, but also he's not moving away from fossil fuels, from gas and oil, because Kazakhstan is investing. I said you were covering that particular session. That vice minister said that we've, I think, invested into 16 new projects
in 2024.
We are diversifying routes to export our oil and gas. So that's interesting because, yes, we are on board, but we are a country that still GDP is pretty much relies on oil.
Yeah,
I think.
as Aida mentioned, I was exactly at that panel session. It was there were some experts, some global industry leaders, and also people from the Ministry of Energy who were talking about energy security, energy transition. And the key message there was that we are not moving away from oil and gas. It's still with us. It's still vital for the economy, to the economy. It's just the thing that I think balancing the energy mix. But I'm really wondering to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what is the future of hydrocarbons here in Kazakhstan, and do we really have to move away from them?
I fully understand your sentiment that energy transition seems a bit far removed.
Right.
And, the difficulty of climate policy is that the costs have to be borne in the short run, but the benefits will, be reaped in the longer run. That's the difficulty also for policymakers, because most of them need like easier short-term wins, right? So we also have to be very realistic that fossil fuels are not going to go away from Kazakhstan's energy mix. Currently, if we talk about power sector exclusively, renewables, we're around 3% in 2021, and now it's more than 6% in 2024, which is, a good amount of growth. And we will install even more renewable capacity because we have large 1 gigawatt projects all around Kazakhstan from Masdar, Aqua Power, and other players. But, still, the majority of our electricity comes from coal. And honestly, economics dictates it all. Like, as long as coal is cheap, affordable, and in such huge reserves that Kazakhstan has, it's going to stay there. But probably there are technologies that, President Tokayev mentioned, clean coal, or like different ways to capture and store these emissions. If you look at decarbonization strategy by 2060, it says that in 2060, it doesn't say that we will be not emitting any CO2. That's not possible, right? But it says that we will be capturing the amount that we are emitting. So the big assumption here is that there will be carbon capture and storage technologies. And it looks like, I also read the National Infrastructure Plan, it looks like the natural gas will be playing more and more role in domestic energy mix. Now it's like around 20%, and it's going probably to get a bigger share, because what we are seeing in Almaty, for example, and here in Astana, is a coal to gas transition. So basically retrofitting coal power plants into gas or building new gas capacities. Gas is considered as a bridge fuel. It's relatively more clean than coal, but it's not as clean as wind and solar. And the difficulty with scaling up wind and solar on a countrywide scale is that they are intermittent, right? So if you look at countries that are 100% renewable, their energy mix is either like almost exclusively hydropower or hydropower plus geothermal, like Iceland. Albania is 100% hydropower, Congo is hydropower. So renewables can't provide baseload power, which means they're not 24/7 there, for you to meet the energy demand. And in the grid, generation has to be equal to supply and demand, have to be always equal. And in that sense, renewables are difficult. I mean, if there will be some technological breakthrough, and the assumption is that there will be one, like batteries.
In storage, right?
So batteries will become more affordable, economic, carbon capture will be there to mitigate the effects of CO2 emissions and things like that. So there are many big assumptions, and we are I think we have to observe. We're being very pragmatic when we say fossil fuels are there because we're being realistic, right? Oil and gas and coal have fueled Kazakhstan's economic growth. But of course, we didn't count the environmental costs. If you, as an economist, if you include in the equation the environmental costs and health costs, then of course it might change the equation a bit. But I feel like we're sort of waiting for these technological breakthroughs, and we will of course benefit from them once they're there.
But it's also very hard to do that, like when you compare Iceland and Kazakhstan in terms of, size.
Right.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
100 times bigger. I want to jump back to the point that you mentioned, capturing emissions. When you were talking about decarbonization strategy of Kazakhstan, could you explain, what does it mean? That, of course, I know that we are not trying to cut all emissions. There will be some, but you mentioned the word capturing. What does it mean?
It is basically removing the CO2 that was emitted, for example, from coal or gas, and then storing it, usually in aquifers or underground in some rocks. It's a very complicated technology, and I don't want us to get into the technicalities of it, but the challenge is that it's very costly and it's not scalable at the moment. So you see, everything boils down to the economics of climate, of energy. As long as this technology is not scalable, we can't really adopted at large scales. But, some good lessons as well, solar photovoltaic cells have gotten 90% cheaper. Same goes for EV batteries.
Right.
Now, EVs are more than half of Chinese internal market share. And if you asked anybody about this 10 or 20 years ago, people would also be skeptical. So maybe what we are saying now about batteries or carbon capture, if there's so much investment in R&D, if there are technological breakthroughs, I imagine that the cost will go down.
So we should just observe and wait until it's coming, right? Like you mentioned, observing.
Just because I don't think Kazakhstan is the front runner in R&D, right? In terms of green technologies. But some countries like China, which is a neighboring country, and the United States and the European Union are investing a lot of money in this. With the US, it might be a slight reversal now because they're also betting more on fossil fuels. President Trump, I think, is supporting nuclear a lot. And I mean, nuclear is not fossil fuels. I meant that he is, also supporting coal.
He needs to bring jobs back to Midwest. I think that's why.
Exactly right. But I also wanted to say, I think I didn't mention nuclear. It's going to play a bigger role in Kazakhstan's energy mix because I think the political will is there, uranium is there, and we will hopefully select some vendors. I mean, it's a relatively clean technology as well. There are certain risks related to costs, to nuclear waste, and of course, public perception is not as favorable sometimes.
Because I've heard and I've seen on social media among my friends when the topic of nuclear power plant was just was just being raised, and everyone was so much concerned about the topic. And I know that sometimes we are not rational in our fears. I know, we are humans, right? But because we have quite a tragic history with the very word of nuclear, people are immediately getting concerned. And I understand them because I was equally concerned about the topic until I sit down and research. But honestly, I haven't yet made my mind about the topic of nuclear because, the nuclear power plant, if we're speaking specifically about Kazakhstan. And you also mentioned some risks, right? Nuclear waste and other important risks, but I think another challenge is that there is quite a shortage of professionals, and that's what I also heard from some experts saying as a concern. If we are ready to build a plan, and I know we will select international consortium, but what we need is a pool of qualified specialists who would be able to run this facility in the long term and to ensure that safety is a top priority and that we are safe from any hazardous situations in the future, right?
I agree. I mean, I also understand the sentiment very well, and I think that in some way it is justified. But the technology has gotten safer and safer over time, and much of that, again, rests on our ability to operate and maintain it in a very safe manner and build it in a way that is, transparent and other things. Human capital problem is there. It is there not only for nuclear energy, it is there also for renewable energy and things like this. So my husband is a renewable energy engineer, and but they are not, in the majority in this country, right? It's a very new emerging field, and the demand is only now emerging. It used to be very prestigious to go to, oil and gas specialties. It still is, but it's a matter of demand and supply.
Well, I remember when I was applying to Bolshak almost like 13 years ago, I think like 80% of all, scholarship receivers were going for oil and gas. So I think now it's much less, like in the mix of Bolshak scholarship. Like right now, I think it's very different. I wonder about the nuclear power plant, because I totally agree with, I said I didn't make my mind either. And I think there's a big problem between the trust between government and people. There's also, it also plays its role. Can I go to the topic of critical minerals?
Sure.
Because you've mentioned batteries, and you've mentioned that batteries are becoming cheaper. And I think we need critical minerals to produce those batteries, right? And I'm afraid that right now, critical minerals is another buzzword at the Astana International Forum. It was also on the agenda.
I'm sorry for naming it like this. I didn't mean to
undermine
the meaning.
Hot topic. But what I'm afraid of, I know that Kazakhstan is rich of critical minerals. We are blessed with the wealth of different, energy resources. But how can we avoid becoming just another source supplier in someone else's green transition? Again, coming back to the point of bringing up this new generation of professionals who will be able to work in that field, not necessarily those coming from abroad, making money here, just exporting it. But I would like to see us providing maintenance for nuclear power plant, for critical minerals, for all those fields, because it's also, it will make us more competitive on the world stage. What do you think?
I agree with you. Critical minerals is indeed a buzzword, and everyone is writing about it, talking about it. But when it comes to reality, it is definitely a necessary thing, because we will need them not only for energy transition, but also for strategic industries like aerospace, medicine. Some countries use it in defense. But when it comes to energy transition, you need copper for grids, for everything, honestly. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, everything. And Kazakhstan has big reserves of this. 18 out of 34 critical minerals that are identified by European Union as such are present in Kazakhstan. But the difficulty on the ground is that we need definitely not become a raw resource base, the Dutch disease, the resource curse. We've heard these terms as well, and we don't want it to repeat, the situation to repeat with critical minerals. In fact, when people talk about critical minerals, they also talk about rare earth, which is a subset of critical minerals. And these are not really rare. They're just very difficult to extract. And they're usually in association with different other minerals, right? So the complexity arises here when you need to actually extract this from the ground.
And divide them.
Yeah,
right?
and separate them. That's a technologically costly process, and economically as well. So when we talk about reserves, we need to be more clear if we're talking about economic reserves or just reserves, because most of these reserves are not really economic to extract, right? And then there comes the next phase, which is processing. Here is the part where we are a little bit lagging behind. We know that globally, more than 85% of processing capacity is concentrated in one country, and that is the People's Republic of China, right? So that's the sort of global trend. China has been a leading manufacturer of wind turbines, solar cells, EV batteries, lithium-ion batteries, and all of these things. And in that sense, it might indeed create a dependency. But, and so that's why the EU and the US are looking into different countries and trying to secure their share of the pie. But, again, this will mean a lot of investment in exploration. I wrote in my Carnegie article that in 1990 alone, when still it was the Soviet Union, investments in exploration works were equal to the amount that we invested from 1990 to 2023. So we're not doing enough to explore, right? Much of that is classified. And
yes.
So it's about creating the environment where these investments can become attractive. And I think now we're turning more and more into this direction. It's positive to see that in rhetoric of officials, including the president and others, that they're paying more attention to this matter. But it's also crucial, again, for the donor community as well, to make sure that this mining is sustainable, Because when we say green energy, we also are not seeing the part of the story where mining of materials for green energy is happening. And that's not always very clean. The mining process itself emits some things, right? And we also need to make sure that we create added value. Not only that we export raw things, but that we have processing capacity in the country.
Right.
We should, and maybe if we don't have the technology and knowledge, then we should learn. So it's about the investors making money here, but also making sure that they train our workforce, that there's technology transfer, R&D investments, both domestically and externally. So I also think that there's a lot of potential for Central Asia-wide cooperation in this matter. You see that this critical minerals rhetoric is also present in Uzbekistan. It's also in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and something, if we are in favor of regional cooperation, we might also think of critical minerals as something that will create this cooperation frameworks in our region. So, for example, if you extract some raw materials in Kyrgyzstan and then go and process them in Kazakhstan, right? That is much cheaper and efficient, and it creates this inter-country cooperation. Right?
Never thought about it like this.
I really want to believe all those investors who are coming to Kazakhstan, and I know the European Union and the US, when they say that we want not only to extract, but we also want to enhance the local production capacity. And I really want to believe that they really mean it when they say it. Like it's not only us becoming just a raw material exporter, but for us also an opportunity to learn something and to transfer some of the best technologies and best practices back home to Kazakhstan. It's a very important topic, I think, because it's 30 years, more than 30 years, and I know that this rhetoric that Western media likes to say that we are a oil-dependent country, hydrocarbons-dependent country, but I really want this rhetoric to change, that we are really trying to do something, and hearing these thoughts from you makes me less skeptical at first, but also makes me think that, yes, we are doing something right in this world.
Yeah, I think it's changing. Like I wrote in my column, I think it's changing. I think Kazakhstan really on the path of reinventing itself economically, diplomatically, because it bets big on AI. I think, some countries even, before Trump, the United States were very skeptical about AI. Now he also wants to harness the potential of artificial intelligence. Europe is kind of also wary. And J.D. Vance, Vice President of the United States, when he was at the beginning of this year at Munich conference, he also said to Europe, let's, partner in AI. We were always talked about as a country with no access to the sea, but with AI, with new technologies, sometimes you don't have to have the sea for you to export, innovation or services, for example. Another expert actually pointed out to me that the wealth of the country is not oil, is not critical minerals, it's people. And you have great people here, he said. And I believe that because I'm one of them. I know that we're very capable. We just need to be trusted. We need to be like believed in that we can do something that we are capable of, and we can do many, many great things. Like yourself, for example, you know.
Yeah. I want to focus now on another word which has come up really frequently in my work as a journalist. And last year I also attended an event in Istanbul which focused on just transition in energy, in energy security. But what is just transition for you, and how real is that in a country like Kazakhstan?
You're bringing up a very important topic here, and it almost feels like it's another buzzword in this whole energy rhetoric. In practice, how many successful cases there were, how many of them failed. It's a very good question to investigate, but it is true that for Kazakhstan, this challenge is stark. I mean, we have monocities depending on industries. True. In coal industry alone, we have more than 30,000 people employed in this industry, and all of them need to have their jobs. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's their source of income. And then coal creates some other types of industries that are around this, right? And the question becomes that of, political will, right? Some people say textbook solutions like, let's just retrain these people, right? But who will pay for this?
Retrain whom?
Retrain coal workers and make sure that they can work on renewables, right? For example. But the thing is that, for example, if you're working on solar power plant, you need many people during construction. But after it's on the line for operation and maintenance, you don't need many people. So what do you do with these people, right? Same, I think about wind. With gas and nuclear, maybe you can, do a 1-to-1 ratio. But I'm not, I don't want to give the wrong estimates here. But this is a very difficult policy question. And I mean, if we go back to the American context again, there are cities such as Detroit that were relying on single industry, automotive industry, and they declined. It's still double-digit unemployment rate, I think. But there are also good examples, like Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania was a very big center for steel industry and coal. Then demand for steel decreased, and the city was also having double-digit unemployment. But they were very strategic about it. They invested in economic diversification. They created, invested in research, healthcare, and now you have Carnegie Mellon. You have University of Pittsburgh, healthcare services, different other industries that create a lot more value, and unemployment rate is lower than national average. So we're definitely not going to copy and paste these experiences for sure. But we have to think strategically about diversifying economies locally already now. Not when the moment comes, right?
Do we have inspiring cases in Kazakhstan?
Yeah,
I mean, like
even
the
the world,
you mentioned,
if you have any.
You said, do we have cases in Kazakhstan?
Like the Pittsburgh case you mentioned, that it invested in diversification and it really transformed. Do we have similar cases, or at least close to that, here in Kazakhstan?
I'm not really sure that we do. I mean, we still have monocities, right? Or monotowns. That's a problem, not unique for Kazakhstan, but it is here. And again, different developments of regions within the country is a big problem that we're going to face. We are already facing. Urbanization is going at a fast rate. People are moving to either Astana or Almaty, maybe to a lesser degree to Shymkent. But I think what we are sort of thinking about now, both within my center, is about exactly mitigating these interregional disparities. And how do we do that? By creating comfortable living conditions, right? And that is not about, some advanced AI data center type employment, right? It's about basics. Like gas, water, heating, wastewater treatment, and things like this.
Right.
So fundamentals first, and then we will see other things. Alatau City, by the way, is a promising project that...
Is it related to creative industries, right?
It's creative industries, but also I think technological
5G,
ones.
something like this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
but I think like monocities are something that we were left by the Soviet Union, by their way of planning the government in general, the economics of the country. of such a huge country. And I think that's right now is a problem not only of Kazakhstan, but also Russian Federation and many other post-Soviet countries. Although I don't like, being called post-Soviet because it has been 35 years.
Right.
We've been, independent and making our own mistakes in the decision-making, our own successes, based on our merit. But I would like to hear, maybe you have some interesting cases, if not in Kazakhstan. You mentioned Pittsburgh. Maybe there are some, other countries that were able to do this just transition. Are there any, is there any hope? That's what I think.
Of
that's
course.
what I'm trying to ask.
Of course, there's always hope, right? But I think one example I'm immediately thinking of is in Germany. There's this province, Ruhr province. Mm-hmm. I really need to delve more into this topic, but I'm sure Germany has been doing a lot, and it's a country with big social welfare system that attempts not to leave people behind, right? I mean, it's just about creating the overall system that is, they give unemployment benefits, they try to invest in people's training, they make sure they learn the local language and things like this. That's the Germany case. I think, but Germany used to be, especially this Ruhr province used to be a very big supplier of coal. I don't know how it is now, but we know that Germany is sort of at the front line of energy transition. People are sometimes, criticizing Germany for closing nuclear because they had to, again, resort to coal for baseload power, right? Because they couldn't go fully renewable. But still, I think it's learning, and it's learning very quickly. And we will have some successful cases to draw from. But again, in policy, it's never a copy and paste thinking. It's usually adapting it to local realities. Like people who have been working in this industry for 40, 30 years. Like it's not very easy to tell to them that you're going to lose your job tomorrow.
True, it's a different mindset, and I think local realities are very much different. Even if we speak about Kazakhstan, which is a very west country, it's 2.7 million square kilometers. It doesn't compare to any other country, around the world. And addressing these regional disparities is very, very important. I totally agree with you on that point. But I also want to mention this, public concern that I'm also witnessing is that why do we talk about this energy transition thing, climate change, if some of the regions, some of the households don't get to have basic fundamentals? And I really like that you mentioned the point that we need to get first, care about the basic necessities for people, like water, heating, because I know that in some cities and not far from Astana, that people don't have hot water.
My hometown, Kokshetau, I think is the only city in the country that has to have this boilers.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
You see, this is very close.
It's like 2 hours away from Astana.
2 hours drive from Astana, or we have Ekibastus, where people had to survive without heating the whole winter a few years ago. I'm not really aware of the situation right now, but I hope they're doing better. But again, this brings me to the point of why don't we get to deal with the basic fundamental first before doing all this energy transition and fancy stuff. But on the other hand, I'm thinking, or should we do it at the same time, all the things? So it's really makes me wondering.
We now have to invest in modernization and things like this, but I don't think the problem emerged last year or the year before, right?
Exactly.
It was the thinking and planning should have been there for quite a long time. It is just that when it starts already, when the consequences are there, then you start noticing it more vividly. But
that's what I really want to change. Here on the government level, that we should shift from this reactive a way of doing things to maybe some sort of strategic. Preventive, right? And it doesn't only has to do with the government things. Genuinely, people have to be preventive in things they do about life, about their things, because wherever I see something happening here in Kazakhstan, and it doesn't concern only energy facilities or energy topics, that we react. We don't take actions to prevent those things from happening, but we react to something bad already happening. So
I think it's called firefighters mode, right? Where there's fire, you take care of the fire, but you're not preventing the fire hazard before it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's in some ways an inertia stemming from human nature. Like we don't want to think about unpleasant things before they actually come.
True.
But we also have so much information now, right? That's why I raised this talk at the beginning about climate adaptation and resilience, right? We know that droughts are already here. We know that this is not climate, but earthquakes. We know that they might happen in certain regions. So what do we make sure to take in terms of actions to make sure that not the entire city is devastated, right? Do we impose stricter standards on buildings, or do we teach people how to react first minutes of this thing happening? So all of this question, again, I think it boils down to mentality. It's not only about state level actions, state should do this and that, but also about how do we create incentives for private sector and for population to make sure that they're also interested in that, right? So of course the government can say we can, finance all of this infrastructure, but it's much easier if we say, okay, we will make sure that investors are interested in also benefiting from that and creating co-benefits locally. A private sector always has, of course, right, a more dynamic scale of decision, speed of decision making, things like this. So I think a lot of it, both in climate action or in economic development, will hinge on this public-private partnerships or public-private cooperation.
And on communication, I think. Better
Exactly.
communication, and not only between government and the public, but also between different stakeholders, because communication is what we have been lacking, like on a broader scale, but also in human-to-human connections, right?
I agree. Yeah, 100%.
I wanted to ask about the misconception about energy transition. What are your thoughts? What politicians, media, and general public, like their big misunderstanding about energy transition, in your point of view?
That's a very good question. I mean, I personally think that it is not a very productive way to think in general about the world in terms of dialectics, right? It's either or. It can be both, right? So when we talk about energy transition, how do we know that we're there? Like China is the leader in terms of renewable energy installed capacity. It's already more than 30% electrified, but it's also like more than 60% fossil fuels for its energy reliance, right? So I read this article recently on national interest about distinction between petrostates and electrostates. So states that rely on fossil fuels and then states that electrify their economies, like China, right? In a way, Kazakhstan has foot in both worlds. Like we are a major fossil fuel exporter, but also we have this opportunity to help diversify supply chains through our critical minerals, right? We also have something to contribute. So I think that when we think about energy transition, we have to make sure that it is balanced with energy security. So when necessary, resort to more safer sources that can always provide baseload, right? Like nuclear, hydro, and sometimes gas, right? But also make sure that we're not left behind. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, but another point that I wanted to raise here is that we should think about energy transition as a long-term goal, but it should be broken down into smaller parts. Like, of course, we can say, it's like on a diet example, right? You say, I want to lose, like, I don't know, somebody says like 20 kilos in 2 years, right? And, okay, I need to lose 20 kilos in 2 years, but it's much better if he says, okay, in this month I lose 2, then I lose 2 more, and then 2 more, and 2 more.
Step.
So, right? And it doesn't seem that scary anymore.
Right.
So in terms of green transition, I think it should be the same way of thinking. Like, it's not easy to think about decarbonizing the power sector, but we can do low-hanging fruits first. So what if we think about greening all public transportation in Kazakhstan? That sounds like a more achievable goal, right? Rather than getting rid of coal entirely. So I think there should be some thinking like this here, like gradually, but making sure that we set achievable and measurable goals in the shorter to medium term. That's why I'm very much looking forward to this roadmap for the decarbonization strategy, because we will have exactly not only broad goals or general numbers, but exact sectoral targets and things like this.
Is it out already, or?
I think they're working on it.
They're working on it.
It's still work in progress.
I think it is a very positive note to wrap up the conversation that we are having today. I know we could be talking for hours. This is a very important topic for me, for us as journalists, but also for you as an expert. I want to thank you for coming to us, to joining us tonight in the studio. But before we wrap up the conversation, we have a little tradition inspired by one of our favorite podcasts. So we ask you to come up with one question that we would ask our next guests of the podcast. But we also ask you one question which was given to us by our previous guests. And the question is very much very, very familiar to you. The question was, what do you think is middle power?
Well, I think I know who asked this question.
I think you know
Mr.
too.
Miraz Jembaev, right? Hi to Miraz. Well, different people define it differently, but in international relations, there's this traditionally division between great powers, which are United States, China, and Russia, powers with significant economic prowess, but also nuclear arsenal. Middle powers are different in that perhaps their, military capacities or territorial size might not be that big, but their economies are strong and robust. They have something to offer to this world. They're strong in terms of diplomacy and navigating between this complex politics. And they're the countries where their citizens want to live and build their lives in the long term.
Well, that's a very comprehensive answer that you have, David.
you.
Could you come up with a question that we would pose to our next guest?
I'm curious to know about that person's thought, whoever that might be, about development of Kazakhstan's regions. How do we mitigate interregional disparities in Kazakhstan? Because almost in political science as well, we tend to think there's, big powers, capitals, things like this. But somehow I feel like other regions somehow get neglected in this whole discussion. And I just wanted that person to shed light on, maybe that person is from a region of Kazakhstan that is not Almaty or Astana, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe they have a very interesting perspective on this.
Yeah. I think that's a cool question.
For this question, we'll keep that in mind. And thank you again, Aruzhan, for joining us tonight in the studio.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure for me, and I really appreciate your questions. Thank you.